Welcome to Reader Tales. Today's story asks, Ada for telling my brother his passion project is just an excuse to avoid work? Before we dive in, if you love real-life stories and juicy family drama, please hit that like button and subscribe to Reader Tales so you don't miss our next upload. So, I'm at my wit's end, and honestly, I probably need to know if I'm the asshole here. I just had a massive blowout with my brother Alex, and our parents are caught in the crossfire, giving me the silent treatment. This has been brewing for years, but it finally hit a breaking point a few weeks ago. Let's start with some background. Alex and I, 30F, grew up pretty close, but we're fundamentally different people. I've always been the practical, goal-oriented one. Went to college, got a degree in marketing, started climbing the corporate ladder pretty much right after graduation. I'm not saying I love every minute of it, but I've built a stable life. I have my own apartment, I pay my bills, I'm saving for a down payment on a house, all the responsible adult stuff, you know? Alex, on the other hand, has always been the dreamer. Creative, artistic, always had his head in the clouds, which, fine, I respect that. The problem is, his dreams never seem to materialize into anything concrete. After high school, he dabbled in a few community college courses, photography, creative writing, graphic design, but never finished anything. He'd work odd jobs for a few months, save up a bit, and then quit to focus on his art. He calls it following his muse. I call it a convenient way to avoid commitment. Our parents, bless their hearts, have always enabled him. They're good people, hardworking, but they have this blind spot when it comes to Alex. They see his potential and his sensitive soul and interpret his lack of direction as a noble pursuit of passion. For years, they've been supplementing his income, paying his rent, even covering his health insurance. They call it investing in his future. I call it supporting a grown man who refuses to take responsibility. It's been happening since he turned 18, slowly escalating from helping with a textbook here or there to covering his entire living expenses. For a long time, I bit my tongue. It wasn't my money, right? But it started affecting me indirectly. Family dinners would revolve around Alex's latest project, a screenplay he'd been developing for 3 years, a podcast he'd researched but never recorded, an elaborate series of paintings he'd conceptualized but only sketched. My parents would excitedly ask me for my input on his ideas, expecting me to be as enthusiastic as they were. Meanwhile, when I talked about my promotion or my latest work project, it was met with polite nods, then a quick pivot back to Alex. It felt like my hard work was invisible, while his perpetual potential was celebrated. They'd ask about my job with a tone that implied, "Are you still doing that mundane thing, dear? Or have you found your true calling yet?" It was subtly dismissive, and it stung. The real problem began about 2 years ago when Alex declared his biggest passion project yet. He was going to become a professional, independent game developer. Not just a coder, mind you, but the entire package: design, art, story, everything. He got really into indie games and saw them as the perfect blend of all his creative interests. I even tried to be supportive at first. Game development is a huge industry, and if he really applied himself, maybe this could be it. But Alex's approach was, predictably, not serious. He spent months researching engines, watching tutorials, talking endlessly about his vision. He built an elaborate studio in his bedroom, complete with multiple monitors, fancy chairs, and custom lighting, all paid for by our parents. Of course, this was not a modest setup. We're talking high-end gaming peripherals, ergonomic chairs that cost more than my first car payment, and LED strips everywhere to create the perfect ambiance. He even designed a logo for his company before he'd written a single line of functional code. He shared this logo on social media with a dramatic caption about his journey. He talked about it like it was a full-time job. "I've been grinding 12 hours a day on the game." He'd say when what he meant was he'd spent 12 hours watching YouTube videos about game design, playing other games for research, and occasionally drawing a concept sketch for a character he'd never built. When I asked about his actual progress, it was always vague. "We're in the conceptual phase." Or, "It's all about iterative design, sis." He'd use jargon he'd clearly just learned, trying to sound knowledgeable, but when pressed for specifics, he'd deflect. "It's too early to show," or "you wouldn't understand the complexities." My parents were thrilled. "He's so dedicated." My mom would gush to her friends, usually within earshot of me. "He's finally found his calling," my dad would add. They started telling everyone about Alex, the indie game developer, even though he hadn't produced anything beyond a few rough sketches and a non-functional demo that was basically just a loading screen with his fancy logo. They even started calling him our little Zuckerberg. I just wanted to scream. Zuckerberg actually built something. Things escalated when he decided he needed a quiet space to work. His current apartment, which our parents pay rent for, was apparently too noisy. He claimed the city sounds were disrupting his creative flow. So he convinced them to let him convert our old childhood treehouse, a dilapidated structure in their backyard, into his creative retreat. Now, this treehouse holds a lot of sentimental value for me. We built it with Dad when we were kids. It was our secret fort, our escape. I had hoped to eventually fix it up myself, maybe turn it into a little guest studio someday, a place for me to relax and reconnect with my childhood. But Alex got to it first. He didn't just clean it up. He convinced Mom and Dad to put significant money into it. They installed insulation, upgraded the wiring, put in new windows, and even added a small custom-built desk and a mini fridge. It cost them thousands. I saw the receipts once, over 50, just for the treehouse renovation. All for a space he uses maybe once a week, mostly to think or meditate, he says. Meanwhile, his actual work still happens in his fully furnished, parent-paid apartment. It was a slap in the face. My sacred space turned into another one of his fleeting whims. I saw the strain it put on my parents' finances. My mom started complaining about cutting back on groceries, and my dad talked about postponing his retirement plans. They were visibly tired, yet they refused to see Alex for what he was. They justify every expense, every failed venture, every empty promise. He just needs a bit more time, my mom would say, her eyes weary. He's so close to a breakthrough, my dad would echo, forcing a smile. The final straw came a few weeks ago. My car, my trusty old Honda that I'd paid for myself and maintained meticulously, finally broke down. It was a major repair. Transmission issues over 2-0. I had savings, but it hit hard. I was already planning my house down payment, and this was a significant setback. I mentioned it to my parents, hoping for some sympathy, maybe a small temporary loan to tide me over if things got tight while I rebuilt my savings. Their response? My mom wrung her hands and said, "Oh, honey, we're so sorry. We'd help, but things are a bit tight right now with Alex's new studio. He just needed those special monitors for his flow state, you know? They were on sale for a limited time." My dad nodded grimly. "Yes, son's career takes precedence right now, Alara. You're stable, you can handle it." That was it. That was the last straw. My blood ran cold. They were prioritizing Alex's expensive, non-existent career over my actual legitimate financial need after years of me being fully self-sufficient, paying my own way, never asking for a cent. It was a betrayal, a complete invalidation of all my hard work. The simmering resentment boiled over into pure, unadulterated rage. I went straight to Alex's apartment that evening, fuming. I didn't even knock properly, I just used my key and walked straight in. He was, naturally, playing video games. Not working on his game, but playing something else. Some online multiplayer RPG, headphones on, shouting into his mic. His expensive studio setup, lit by glowing RGB lights, looked like a shrine to idleness. "Alex," I said, my voice dangerously calm, barely above a whisper, but laced with an icy edge that made him flinch. "We need to talk." He paused the game, pulling off his headphones, looking annoyed. His face showed a mixture of surprise and slight indignation. "What's up, sis? Is it about my new monitors? They're incredible. You should see the refresh rate. Super immersive." He gestured proudly at the triple screen setup. "It's about your monitors, Alex. It's about this whole game development studio that Mom and Dad are bankrolling while I'm trying to figure out how to pay for a $2,000 car repair that just wiped out my emergency fund." My voice was rising now, losing its calm. He scoffed, leaning back in his expensive chair. "What's your problem? I'm working. This is my career. This is an investment in my future." He waved his hand dismissively, as if my concerns were trivial. "No, Alex, this isn't a career. This isn't an investment. It's an expensive hobby your parents are funding because you refuse to get a real job. You're almost 30. When are you going to grow up?" My voice cracked with frustration. His face hardened, his jaw clenching. It is a real job. It's demanding. Creative work takes time. You wouldn't understand. You just push papers in some cubicle all day. Time to play video games all day? I practically spat. Time to conceptualize for years without producing anything tangible? You're 28, Alex. You've never held a job for more than 6 months. You've never paid your own rent. You talk a big game, pun intended, but you don't actually do anything. This passion project is just an excuse to avoid real work, avoid responsibility, and keep living off mom and dad. I gestured wildly at his expensive setup, the pristine, untouched art supplies, the general air of pampered idleness. He shot up from his chair, his eyes blazing. You don't understand. You're just a corporate drone. You have no artistic soul. You're jealous. You're jealous of my freedom, of my creativity, of the fact that I'm actually pursuing something meaningful. Jealous? I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed in the overly silent apartment. Jealous of what, Alex? Jealous of your mountain of debt that mom and dad will probably have to bail you out of? Jealous of the fact that you'll be 40, still living in their basement, talking about the game you're about to finish? No, I'm not jealous. I'm angry. I'm angry that they're bleeding themselves dry for your delusion while ignoring the one kid who actually supports herself. They're cutting back on groceries because of your flow state monitors, Alex. He yelled something about me being toxic and unsupportive, and then he lunged towards the door, slamming it shut in my face before I could say another word. The sound reverberated through the apartment building, probably alarming the neighbors. I went home, still seething. My parents called me later, separately. My mom was in tears. How could you say those things to your brother? You know how sensitive he is. He's pursuing his dream. You've crushed him. My dad was more stoic, but equally disapproving. You crossed a line, Alara. Family supports each other. Alex needs our help right now, not your negativity. I tried to explain my perspective about the unfairness, about them enabling him to the detriment of their own financial security and my legitimate needs. I reminded them about the treehouse, about the car repair, about their own financial stress. But they just kept saying I was jealous and unnecessarily cruel. They hung up on me one after the other. Now, it's been 2 weeks. They're not answering my calls or text. Alex blocked me on everything. I'm sitting here wondering if I really went too far. Was it my place to say that? Should I have just kept quiet, even though it feels so incredibly unfair and they seem blind to his exploitation? Part of me thinks I finally said what needed to be said, what they all needed to hear. He needs a wake-up call, and so do they. But the other part of me feels a pang of guilt. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I did destroy a fragile dream. But is a dream that fragile even worth having if it can't withstand a little truth? Did I just alienate my entire family for a principle? So, Reddit, tell me, Ada for telling my brother his passion project is just an excuse to avoid work and for causing this massive family fallout? I feel completely alone in this. TLDR. My brother has been living off our parents for years, funding his expensive passion project game development career that produces nothing, while I'm self-sufficient and financially struggling. After they prioritized his needs over mine, a car repair over his new monitors, I exploded and told him his project was just an excuse to avoid real work, leading to a huge family fight where my parents are now giving me the silent treatment. Ada? UP date 1. A week later. It's been a rough week. My parents are still giving me the cold shoulder. My mom sent a very formal text asking me to think about what I said. I haven't heard from Alex at all. I know he blocked me, but I half expected some furious rant from him via email or a mutual friend. Nothing, just silence. It's unsettling. The silence is almost worse than the fight. It makes me feel like I'm truly alone in this, like I'm the villain. My car is fixed, thankfully, but it wiped out a good chunk of my emergency fund, which is a constant stressor. I actually had to pick up some freelance marketing work on the side to start rebuilding it, which means even less free time. I tried reaching out to my aunt, who is usually the most neutral family member and tends to be a bit more pragmatic than my parents, hoping for some perspective. She just sighed and said, "Oh, Alara, you know Alex has always been a bit delicate. Your parents just want him to be happy, and this game-making thing is the only thing that seems to keep him truly engaged. Not exactly helpful." It felt like she was excusing his behavior, just like my parents do. It's infuriating that everyone seems to protect him at my expense. I'm standing my ground though. I refuse to apologize for speaking my truth, even if it was harsh. I just hope that eventually they'll see my side, or at least acknowledge that Alex isn't being entirely fair. Or maybe, just maybe, Alex will actually start, developing a game. Unlikely, but a girl can dream, right? I keep replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if there was a softer way to phrase it. But every time I land on the same conclusion, the truth needed to be said, however unpalatable. Update 2. 3 weeks later. Okay, Reddit. So something actually happened, and it's a big one. It's not what I expected, and it's complicated. My dad called me yesterday. His voice was strained, tired. He didn't start with an apology or even a real greeting. He just said, "Look, Alara, your mother is still very upset, and she's not speaking to me either right now, but I need to talk to you about Alex." My heart pounded. I braced myself for another lecture, another plea for me to apologize, but it wasn't that. He then admitted that after my outburst, something shifted in him. My words, as harsh as they were, had clearly landed. He started looking closer at Alex's finances, at the vague request for money. Alex had recently asked for a significant chunk of money, over 3-0, for marketing and professional development for his game, which my dad said just didn't feel right. It raised a big red flag for him, something he'd previously ignored. So Dad dug deeper. He asked Alex for actual projections, a real business plan, concrete proof of progress beyond vague statements and concept art. Alex, predictably, got defensive, then angry, then completely evasive. Dad said he pressed him harder than he ever had before. Eventually, it all came out. Alex confessed that he hadn't made any significant progress on game development in over a year. He'd lost interest in the coding part, finding it too technical and tedious. Instead, he'd secretly signed up for an expensive online gaming course, not for development, but for streaming and professional competitive gaming. He'd been spending most of his game development funds on upgrading his streaming setup, buying new release games, and subscribing to various premium gaming services. The marketing money he was asking for was going to buy followers and viewers for his Twitch channel, which he was desperately trying to grow as a new professional gamer streamer. He'd been lying to our parents for months, telling them he was still working on the game while secretly pivoting to another passion project he thought would make him famous without telling them. My dad sounded completely devastated. He said he felt like a fool, like he'd been taken advantage of. He also admitted that Alex has amassed a significant amount of credit card debt over the past few years, beyond what they knew about, which he had promised to pay off with his game earnings, but clearly hadn't. It's a much bigger financial hole than any of us, even my parents, realized. My dad found statements from several different cards, all maxed out. It's in the tens of thousands. My mom is apparently still in a state of denial, wanting to believe Alex will turn it around and that this is just a temporary setback. She's refusing to speak to my dad because he's being too hard on Alex. But my dad is absolutely furious. He's finally seen the pattern. He told Alex he's cutting off his allowance immediately and has given him an ultimatum. He needs to get a regular, full-time job within the next month, or he's cutting off the apartment rent money too. He also told Alex that he needs to start paying his own health insurance. He even admitted that my past warnings about Alex always wanting a new shiny thing and never sticking with anything were ringing painfully true. He didn't apologize to me, not directly. He's not really the apologizing type. But he did say, very quietly, "You were right, Alara, about him not having a plan, about it being an excuse." It's not a full reconciliation, Reddit. My mom is still upset with me, probably because it was my words that triggered this painful truth for them. And my dad is still processing everything. But it's a crack in the wall. A big one. The dynamic has shifted. Alex, predictably, is furious at my dad and is now calling me, demanding I talk some sense into him, saying I ruined everything and turned dad against him. I haven't responded to his calls or texts. This isn't my fight anymore, not directly. This is his reckoning. I feel a mix of vindication and profound sadness for my parents, who genuinely believe they were helping him, but I also feel a quiet sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, this will be the push Alex actually needs to grow up and face reality. Or maybe he'll just find a new passion project to mooch off of once he finds someone else to enable him. Time will tell. But for now, the silence from my parents feels a little less heavy, and the noise from Alex feels less like a threat and more like a desperate, entitled plea.